Sarah had always imagined family life would be simple, warm dinners, laughter echoing in the living room, small gestures of love. But blending families was never simple, and she quickly learned that patience was her greatest ally. Since marrying Michael 6 months ago, she had stepped into a house that already had its rhythms, its unspoken rules, and, most importantly, a teenage son named Ethan, who seemed polite but distant. He wasn't rude. He was cautious, wary of the new woman trying to enter his life. And Sarah understood that. She knew trust took time, and she had all the patience in the world. Or at least she tried to. It was a rainy evening, the kind that made the streets outside shimmer with reflections of streetlights. And the sound of raindrops tapping against windows filled the house with a steady, calming rhythm. Sarah was carrying a basket of laundry down the hallway, the damp smell of rain mixing with the faint scent of soap, when she paused. A soft thump followed by a muffled sigh came from the bathroom. She frowned slightly. Michael's footsteps weren't anywhere near, and Ethan was supposed to be in his room doing homework. Curiosity stirred inside her. She walked slowly toward the bathroom, her steps light on the carpeted floor. The door was slightly ajar, and through the gap she could see Ethan struggling. He was kneeling by the sink, a small wrench in his hand, and water dripped steadily onto the tiled floor. The faucet had clearly been acting up for a while, and he was trying to fix it himself. But it was obvious he was in over his head. His brow was furrowed, his hands shaking slightly, and every so often he sighed in frustration. Sarah's heart softened. Here was a young man trying to manage something alone, clearly unsure of himself. She knew that feeling well, walking into a situation where you didn't know if you belonged, where everything felt just a little too big, a little too complicated. And yet there was a certain charm to the way he tried so hard, refusing to give up even when it seemed hopeless. She took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves, and knocked gently on the doorframe. "Hey, Ethan. Need a hand?" she asked, keeping her voice calm, warm, and non-threatening. Ethan jumped slightly, the wrench clattering to the floor. His cheeks flushed red, and he looked up at her with wide, startled eyes. For a moment, he said nothing. Then he nodded slowly, as if admitting that he could indeed use some help. Sarah stepped into the bathroom, careful not to crowd him. She crouched beside him, her presence calm and reassuring. "It's okay," she said softly, picking up the wrench. "Let's take a look together." Ethan glanced at her, his expression a mix of gratitude and embarrassment. He muttered something under his breath about being clumsy and hopeless with plumbing, and Sarah chuckled. It wasn't a loud laugh, just a gentle sound meant to ease the tension. "Everyone struggles at first," she replied. "Even adults. You're not alone, you know?" They worked together in relative silence, the occasional drip of water filling the space between them. Sarah guided his hands gently, showing him how to tighten the faucet properly. Ethan followed her instructions, fumbling at times, but slowly the leak began to slow. There was a quiet rhythm to the moment, a shared focus, a mutual effort, soft understanding that transcended words. At one point, Ethan paused, wiping sweat from his forehead. I didn't think anyone would help me with something like this," he admitted quietly. Almost ashamed, Sarah smiled, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "It's never dumb to ask for help," she said simply. "I'm glad you asked. It gives us a chance to work together." He looked at her then, really looked. And there was a flicker of emotion in his eyes that she didn't expect. It wasn't romantic in the traditional sense, but there was a tenderness, a longing for connection, that made Sarah's chest tighten just slightly. She quickly reminded herself to step back emotionally. He was her stepson. But she couldn't deny the depth of feeling the moment stirred within her. By the time the leak was fixed, the bathroom floor was still damp, but the tension had eased. Ethan sat back on his heels, breathing a little easier, and gave her a shy smile. "Thanks, Sarah," he said again. "Really, you're welcome," she replied. She felt a small warmth spreading in her chest, a mix of pride and affection. It wasn't just about fixing a faucet, it was about connecting, about building trust, about being seen. And she realized with a quiet thrill that these small moments mattered more than she had expected. As they cleaned up the water together, Exchanging light conversation and jokes about how stubborn the faucet had been, Sarah felt a surprising closeness to him. She had always known that family wasn't only about blood, it was about care, attention, and shared experiences. And here, kneeling side by side in a small, rain-lit bathroom, she felt the beginnings of something important, something fragile and precious. Ethan seemed to relax too, his earlier stiffness melting away. "You make it easier," he said quietly, almost to himself. "I mean, it's nice to not feel alone." Sarah's throat tightened. She offered a gentle nod. "I'm glad you feel that way. Everyone deserves someone who cares." The rain outside intensified, tapping harder against the window. Inside, there was a quiet warmth, sense of safety and understanding that neither of them had expected at the start of the evening. Sarah knew the bond between them was just beginning, but she also sensed it had the potential to grow into something meaningful, a connection built not on obligation or convenience, but on trust, respect, and shared moments like this. As they finally stepped back, drying their hands and straightening up, Sarah caught herself stealing a glance at Ethan. He was still awkward, still shy, but there was a spark of something more, a hint of hope, of openness, of a willingness to let someone in. And for Sarah, that small, fragile spark was enough to fill her heart with warmth, even as she reminded herself to maintain the careful boundaries of her role. "Good job," she said softly, ruffling his hair lightly, just enough to be kind without overstepping. "You're a quick learner." Ethan smiled a little more freely now and nodded. "Thanks for helping. I really appreciate it." Sarah returned his smile, her heart full of quiet emotion. She knew challenges lay ahead. Blending families was never simple, and there would be misunderstandings, frustrations, and awkward moments. But tonight had been a start, a moment of connection, a bridge between two hearts, learning to understand each other. As she left the bathroom, carrying the now empty laundry basket, Sarah couldn't shake the thought that something important had shifted in the room, a delicate, tender bond born from a simple act of helping, a small gesture that might change everything. And deep down, she wondered how far this connection would grow, and what it might teach them both about love, family, and the quiet power of understanding. Outside, the rain continued to fall, relentless and steady, washing the streets clean. Inside, a new chapter had quietly begun. After that rainy evening in the bathroom, something shifted between Sarah and Ethan. It wasn't dramatic or sudden, it was subtle, almost imperceptible, like the first hint of dawn on a quiet morning. But Sarah noticed it immediately. Ethan's demeanor had softened. He smiled more often, lingered slightly longer in conversations, and seemed easier to reach. She felt a strange warmth each time he looked at her, with quiet gratitude, as if sharing these small moments made him more comfortable in a house that had always felt just a little foreign to him. Sarah had always been careful to maintain boundaries. She reminded herself constantly that Ethan was her stepson, and her role was to guide, support, and nurture, not to intrude or overstep. Yet, despite her caution, she couldn't deny the human connection that was forming. There was a gentle closeness now, a subtle understanding that went beyond words. And she found herself looking forward to these moments more than she expected. It started with small gestures. One evening, Sarah returned from the grocery store carrying 2 bags of fresh fruit. She found Ethan in the living room, curled up on the couch with a book. "Hey, want some apples?" she asked, holding out the bag. He looked up, eyes brightening, and nodded. "Yeah, thanks." She handed him one, and for a moment they just sat there, eating quietly. There was no rush, no tension, only a soft companionship that felt unexpectedly comforting. Later that week, Michael mentioned that the bathroom faucet had been leaking again. Sarah decided not to wait for Ethan to fix it alone. She knocked on his door and found him struggling with another small household repair. This time, he looked less embarrassed, more willing to ask for help. "I tried again, but it won't stop dripping," he admitted. Sarah smiled. "Let's see if we can fix it together, okay?" They crouched side by side, hands brushing occasionally. exchanging light jokes about the stubborn faucet and their plumbing skills. Sarah noticed that Ethan laughed more freely now, a sound that was genuinely warm and unguarded. It was moments like these, quiet, simple, yet emotionally charged, that made Sarah realize how much she valued his presence in her life. One evening, as they were putting away tools after fixing the faucet, Ethan hesitated before speaking. I sometimes feel like I don't belong," he said softly, his voice barely audible over the rain outside. Sarah's heart tightened. She put down the wrench and turned to him. "You do belong, Ethan," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "This house, this family, we're learning together. You're an important part of it, and your presence matters." Ethan's eyes glistened. I don't always feel understood. I try to do my best, but sometimes it feels like I'm failing." "You're not failing," Sarah assured him, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Everyone feels that way sometimes. It doesn't mean you're not enough." He looked at her, searching her face for sincerity, and Sarah met his gaze fully. There was a quiet intensity in his eyes that startled her, not romantic in the traditional sense, but deeply emotional, a need for connection that was almost tangible. Sarah felt her chest tighten. She wanted to pull him into a comforting hug to ease the invisible weight he carried. But she reminded herself of the boundaries she needed to maintain. Instead, she offered a gentle smile, letting her presence speak instead of words. Over the next few days, the bond between them deepened naturally. Ethan would leave small notes for her when she was busy, simple messages of thanks or drawings he had made. Sarah would respond with her own notes or a small gesture, a warm mug of cocoa waiting for him after school, a favorite snack left on the counter. These were tiny moments, yet each carried a weight of meaning that neither of them openly acknowledged. One afternoon, Sarah found Ethan in the kitchen, staring out the window at the garden. He didn't speak at first, but she sensed his mood. "Hey," she said softly, joining him. "What's on your mind?" Ethan sighed. "I don't know. I guess I'm just thinking about everything. School, friends, this house. Everything feels complicated sometimes." Sarah nodded, understanding. "Life can feel that way sometimes. But you're not alone, Ethan. You have people who care about you, who want to help you through the hard parts." He turned to her, small, almost shy smile on his face. "You make it easier. You make it feel like someone actually sees me, you know?" Sarah's throat tightened, and for a brief moment she felt a swirl of emotions she hadn't expected. Pride, warmth, affection, and a subtle human longing all mixed together. She took a slow breath, reminding herself to stay grounded. Her role was clear: guide, nurture, protect, and love without crossing lines. And yet she could not deny the depth of the connection growing between them. A bond that was emotional, intimate, and profoundly human. As the days passed, Sarah began noticing the little things that made Ethan special: his quiet thoughtfulness, the way he tried to help even when unsure, the gentle humor he displayed once he felt comfortable. Each moment spent together strengthened their connection, building trust and familiarity. She realized that family wasn't about perfection or easy days. It was about showing up, caring, and finding small ways to let someone know they mattered. One evening, while putting away dishes after dinner, Sarah found Ethan lingering near the sink. "Can I ask you something?" he said, hesitating. "Of course," she replied, setting down the last plate. I don't always know how to talk to people," he admitted. "I feel like I mess things up, even with, well, everyone." Sarah knelt slightly to meet his gaze. "It's okay. You don't have to have all the answers. You just have to be willing to try, and that's enough. You've done plenty, Ethan, more than you realize." He smiled faintly, small, shy expression, and Sarah felt a surge of protective affection. She wanted to tell him he was more capable than he thought, that he didn't need to hide his worries, that it was okay to lean on someone he trusted. But she also knew that guiding him quietly, letting him feel his own progress, was the truest way to help. Later that week, Michael mentioned a small plumbing issue again, but this time Ethan didn't look anxious. He turned to Sarah with confidence, albeit shy, and said, "I think I can try this one myself first. But maybe you could watch just in case?" Sarah smiled, recognizing the growth in him. "Of course," she said warmly, stepping beside him. As they worked, side by side, she felt the quiet joy of shared effort and connection. It was no longer just about fixing leaks or learning skills. It was about trust, companionship, and the subtle, emotional intimacy that comes from knowing someone believes in you. By the end of the evening, the faucet was fixed, the floor dry, and Ethan's confidence visibly stronger. He looked at Sarah with genuine gratitude, and she felt a wave of warmth that was both comforting and emotionally stirring. She knew the bond between them was growing, rich with understanding and care, and that it would shape the family in ways they couldn't yet foresee. As the rain continued outside, Sarah realized that sometimes love wasn't about grand gestures or dramatic declarations. It was about patience, presence, and the quiet moments where hearts connect and trust is built. And in that understanding, she found a soft, enduring hope that they could navigate life together with compassion, support, and the kind of closeness that makes a house feel like a true home. After weeks of small moments and quiet connections, the bond between Sarah and Ethan had grown deeper. It wasn't flashy or obvious, but it was there, an undercurrent of understanding, trust, and emotional closeness that neither of them had expected. Sarah had learned to recognize the subtle ways he showed care, like leaving her a cup of tea exactly how she liked it, or lingering a moment longer in the hallway to ask about her day. Ethan, on the other hand, seemed more open, more willing to share his thoughts, and more comfortable in his own skin around her. One rainy afternoon, Sarah was reading in the living room when Ethan appeared, holding a notebook in his hands. His expression was uncertain, hesitant, as if he were balancing between shyness and the need to share something important. "Can I sit?" he asked softly. "Of course," she replied, closing her book and patting the space beside her. He settled down, clutching the notebook as if it were a shield, and for a moment neither spoke. The rain outside fell steadily, creating a soft rhythm that seemed to give them both permission to pause and just exist in the same space. Finally, Ethan spoke. "I've been thinking a lot about everything. School, friends, this house, and about me. I feel like I don't always belong anywhere." His voice was quiet, almost a whisper, but Sarah could hear the honesty in it. "You do belong." "Ethan," she said firmly, placing a gentle hand on his arm, "you belong here. You belong with the people who care about you. Feeling unsure sometimes doesn't mean you don't matter." Ethan looked at her, searching her face. There was a vulnerability in his eyes that made Sarah's chest tighten. He was a teenager, yes, but he carried a depth of feeling that was hard to ignore. "You make it easier," he admitted. "You make me feel like I can be myself." Without worrying about what people think, Sarah swallowed the lump in her throat, feeling a swell of emotion she hadn't anticipated. It was more than pride or affection, it was a deep human connection, a longing to comfort, to protect, to be there for him in a way that mattered. She reminded herself quickly of the boundaries she needed to maintain, but the warmth in her chest was undeniable. Over the next few days, their interactions became more open, more natural. Ethan would join Sarah in the kitchen, helping her prepare meals, asking for advice about school, or just talking about things he noticed around the house. Sarah listened, offered guidance, and sometimes laughed at his small jokes. Every interaction strengthened their bond, building trust and emotional intimacy without crossing any lines. One evening, while helping Ethan with a school project in the living room, he hesitated before speaking. I sometimes feel like I don't have anyone to really talk to," he admitted, his fingers fidgeting with a pencil. Sarah put down her notes and gave him her full attention. "You do have someone," she said softly. "You have people who care, who want to listen. And I'm here whenever you need to talk." He looked at her, eyes glistening. "It's just, I've always felt like I had to handle things alone, like no one really understood me. But you get it. You make me feel like it's okay to be honest about how I feel." Sarah felt a wave of emotion wash over her. She wanted to reassure him, to hold him close and tell him everything would be okay. But she knew her role was to support, guide, and nurture without overstepping. Instead, she offered a gentle smile and a nod. "You're stronger than you think, Ethan. And it's okay to lean on someone you trust sometimes. That doesn't make you weak. It makes you human." As they continued working on the project, she noticed subtle changes in him. He was calmer, more confident, more willing to share his ideas. And she realized that their bond was not just emotional, but also transformative. He was growing, learning to trust, and becoming more secure in his place within the family. And she, in turn, felt a quiet fulfillment in being part of that growth, in knowing that her presence made a difference. Later that week, Sarah found Ethan in the kitchen again, this time preparing a simple snack for himself. He glanced up at her, a hesitant smile on his face. "I wanted to do something for you," he said, holding out a small plate with neatly arranged fruit. "I thought you might like it after all the work you've been doing." Sarah's heart warmed at the gesture. "Thank you, Ethan," she said sincerely, taking the plate. "That's very thoughtful of you." She paused, meeting his eyes. "You know, it's not just about what you do. It's about the person you are. You care, and that matters more than anything else." Ethan looked down at the plate, cheeks slightly pink, but there was a spark of pride in his eyes. "I just want to make a difference, I guess. I want to show that I care." Sarah smiled, feeling the depth of their connection. It was moments like these, small, quiet, yet full of meaning, that built the foundation of trust and affection between them. She realized that family wasn't about grand gestures or dramatic displays of love. It was about these tiny, everyday moments where hearts connect, where understanding grows, and where people feel seen. One rainy evening, as they sat together in the living room, the sound of rain tapping against the window, Ethan spoke again. "I'm glad you're here, Sarah," he said quietly. "I don't know what I'd do without you." Sarah's chest tightened. She wanted to tell him how much his words meant to her, how proud she was of his growth, how deeply she cared, but she kept her voice steady. "And I'm glad you're here too, Ethan. We're learning together. That's what family's about." Ethan nodded, a soft, almost shy smile on his face. He leaned back, seeming more relaxed than he had in weeks. And for Sarah, that quiet contentment, that unspoken understanding between them, was enough. It was a reassurance that their connection was genuine, meaningful, and built on trust, care, and emotional closeness. As the storm continued outside, Sarah reflected on the past weeks. She realized that love and affection didn't always have to be dramatic or romantic in the usual sense. Sometimes it was about showing up, listening, understanding, and nurturing. It was about being present in small ways that made a big difference in someone's life. And in that quiet evening, sitting side by side with Ethan, she understood the power of subtle bonds, the kind that could change lives quietly but profoundly. She knew their relationship was unique, rich with emotional depth, and full of potential for growth. It was a connection that required care, patience, and understanding. And she was willing to give it fully, as the night grew darker and the rain softened to a gentle drizzle. Sarah felt a sense of peace. She knew challenges lay ahead, but she also knew that the bond they had formed would help them navigate whatever came next. And in that moment, she made a quiet promise to herself to continue supporting, guiding, and nurturing Ethan while respecting the boundaries that kept their family whole. It was a promise of patience, love, and emotional honesty, promise that would shape the days ahead, strengthening the connection between a stepmother and her stepson in ways that were tender, meaningful, and deeply human. As the days passed, the bond between Sarah and Ethan grew stronger. It was a quiet, steady connection built on shared moments, trust, and understanding. Each day brought small gestures: a cup of tea, a shared joke, a conversation that lingered just a little longer. Sarah noticed that Ethan seemed calmer, more confident, and increasingly willing to open up about his feelings, his fears, and his dreams. And she realized that their connection was no longer just about guidance or support, had become something deeper, a mutual respect and emotional intimacy that filled both of their hearts. One late afternoon, Sarah was tidying the living room when she heard the soft patter of rain outside. Ethan appeared at the doorway, holding a sketchbook. "Can I show you something?" he asked, a hesitant note in his voice. "Of course," Sarah replied, smiling warmly. She gestured for him to sit beside her on the couch. He opened the sketchbook carefully, revealing drawings he had made over the past week, sketches of the house, the garden, and even a few of Sarah herself, captured in small, tender details. Sarah's heart lifted. "These are wonderful, Ethan. You have real talent," she said, genuinely impressed. He looked down, cheeks tinged with pink. I don't usually share them with anyone, but I wanted you to see them. You? You make me feel like I can." Her chest tightened at his words. She placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "I'm honored you trust me with this. It means a lot that you feel comfortable sharing your art with me." Ethan's eyes met hers, glistening with a quiet emotion that tugged at Sarah's heart. It wasn't romantic in a way that crossed lines. It was a raw human vulnerability, a need to be seen and understood. And Sarah, in that moment, felt the full weight of her role in his life, not just as a stepmother, but as a guiding presence, a confidant, and a source of emotional support. That evening, as the rain continued to fall, Sarah and Ethan sat by the window, talking about everything from school projects to favorite books. The atmosphere was light, yet deeply intimate. It was one of those rare moments where words weren't necessary to communicate care and understanding. The quiet presence of one another spoke volumes. Over time, Michael began to notice changes in Ethan as well. The tension that had once seemed to hang over the house had eased. Dinner conversations were livelier, laughter more frequent, and the house felt warmer, fuller. Michael didn't always understand the subtle bond growing between Sarah and his son, but he could see the results. Ethan was happier, more confident, and more willing to engage with the family. One evening, after Michael had gone to bed, Sarah and Ethan were in the kitchen cleaning up after dinner. Ethan hesitated before speaking, as if weighing his words carefully. "Sarah, I just want to say thank you for everything, for helping me, for listening, for being here." Sarah paused, feeling a swell of emotion she struggled to contain. "You don't need to thank me, Ethan. I care about you. That's enough." He looked down at the counter, fingers tracing the edge of a plate. "I know, but it still means a lot. You make me feel like I belong, and that's something I've needed for a long time." Sarah's throat tightened. She wanted to tell him how proud she was, how much she valued his growth, and how deeply she cared, but she kept her voice calm, steady. "I'm glad you feel that way. You do belong here, Ethan, and you always will." There was a pause, a quiet moment of understanding between them. The air was heavy with unspoken feelings, not romantic or inappropriate, but deeply human. Sarah realized that the bond they shared was rare, precious, and transformative. It was a connection that gave both of them strength, comfort, and a sense of belonging. In the following weeks, Sarah found herself reflecting on how much Ethan had grown. He was more confident at school, more open with friends, and more willing to engage with the family at home. And she, too, had changed. Her patience, empathy, and gentle care had grown stronger, shaped by the quiet trust and reliance Ethan placed in her. One rainy evening, as they sat together in the living room, Ethan spoke again, his voice low but sincere. "I don't think I've ever had someone like you in my life before. Someone who really listens and understands. It makes things feel less heavy." Sarah placed a comforting hand over his. "That's what family is for, Ethan. To support each other, to care, to be there through the hard times and the good. You don't have to carry everything alone." He smiled faintly, a quiet expression of gratitude and relief. And Sarah felt the warmth in her chest expand, the profound sense of fulfillment in knowing that her presence had made a real difference in his life. She knew that challenges would come, they always did, but she also knew that together they could face them, strengthened by trust, care, and the emotional intimacy they had built. As the evening wore on, the rain softened to a gentle drizzle. Sarah looked at Ethan, noticing the small changes that spoke of his growth, the confidence in his posture, the ease in his smile, the calmness in his voice. And she realized that what had begun as a simple act of helping him fix a faucet had blossomed into something far more meaningful. Bond that nurtured, healed, and strengthened them both. That night, as they prepared for bed, Ethan paused at the doorway. "Sarah, I'm really glad you're here. I don't know what I'd do without you." Sarah smiled softly, feeling a deep emotional satisfaction. "And I'm glad you're here too, Ethan. We're learning together. That's what family is, being there for each other, no matter what." As she watched him head to his room, she felt a quiet sense of peace. Their connection was unique, tender, and profoundly human. It was a bond built on trust, understanding, and emotional support, safe, meaningful, and lasting. In the days that followed, Sarah continued to nurture that connection. She encouraged Ethan's interests, celebrated his successes, and offered comfort during moments of doubt. Each day brought small victories, shared laughter, quiet conversations, and gestures of care that reinforced the trust between them. And with every interaction, the family grew closer, the house warmer, and the hearts within it more connected. Sarah understood now that love and care didn't always need to be dramatic or visible to the outside world. Sometimes the most powerful connections were quiet, gentle, unspoken, built in moments of trust, shared effort, and mutual understanding. And in that understanding, she found hope, fulfillment, and a deep emotional resonance that made her role in the family more meaningful than she had ever imagined. As the storm outside finally cleared, leaving the streets glistening with the soft reflection of morning light, Sarah felt a sense of accomplishment and quiet joy. She had helped Ethan not just with small repairs, but with the larger, more important work of trust, self-confidence, and emotional security. And in return, he had helped her see the power of patience, empathy, and the quiet strength of connection.